this is the starting point over here. That our audience is starting with. This is where they want to get to on the other side of the spectrum, and there's a gap in the middle. How do you bridge that gap? What are your stepping stones that you've discovered with your product or service that helps people bridge that gap from where they are to where they want to be? That is the most important thing, because now we no longer talk about her as an artisan jeweler. So all of her competition with high street or, I don't know how you would say it in the US, but mainstream jewelers or other artisan jewelers has gone. And she's what we call a memory catcher. And so she works with people who are wanting to capture memories with loved ones, or have lost loved ones and want to remember them. So she takes people who are stuck in a space of grief, and she takes them through what we call the memory catcher's journey, these 5 steps through the memory catcher's journey to a place where they can move forward with their life without feeling guilty about letting go or leaving behind the person that they've lost. And so it's super powerful. And the jewelry elements that she creates are now a tool that help people to get through the memory catcher's journey, to experience the transformation that she had herself. And so that's like a little example of how this works.
Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable From the Trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Brad Bucceri. How did I do?
Perfect. Absolutely
All
perfect.
Right. Good to have you on the show, Brad.
Thank you very much for having me. Super excited to be with you.
So, Brad, what is it you do? What do you call yourself? I was actually looking for a title today, but I'm not sure I found one for you. What do you call yourself?
I am a Sensemaker. So a lot of people will say, are you coach, are you consultant? But no, we are Sensemakers.
Awesome. And we'll by the end of this show, we'll know what a Sensemaker is. And we'll make sense of Sensemakers.
Yes. And if it doesn't make sense, sorry.
I was actually thinking about that when I was preparing this morning for the podcast. I was thinking, I love names, like business names where there's a play on words.
Yes.
Like you can use it in, like I have unified web design. So I've like, I work unified into a lot of different things and conversations, and you can do that with sense a lot. And I used to have a product called Campaign Blasting. This is 20 years ago. And it was a AdWords affiliate marketing product, but I had so much fun with blasting. We were blasters, master blasters. We blasted. It was so fun.
Yeah. It's the best.
So if you can choose a name for your business that you can have fun with and work into stuff, that's a good for branding.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's get into it. So the first thing we do when we have somebody on the podcast for the first time, as my regular listeners will know, we want to get to know you a little bit. We want to kind of learn a little bit about your origin story, what your journey looks like from, in entrepreneurship, business, how you landed doing all the things you're doing today, helping the world make sense of things.
Sure. Wow. Okay. So that's a big starting point. So I guess if I was to break that down a little bit and say, okay, where, let me frame it with the ultimate thing I try and help people with, and then I'll work backwards from that, if that's okay. So I find that a lot of people, a lot of founders particularly, tend to quit too soon, right? And we were kind of talking about this a little bit beforehand. They quit too soon because they believe that their product or service isn't good enough, when actually it's unrelated. It's more about the issues with how they're communicating their product or service to people. And so it kind of all forms around that. And that comes from, that insight comes from my own journey through a lot of different attempts and failures through different ventures and experiences, some of which, again, we spoke about with relating that relate to my dad's Parkinson's diagnosis in 2019, for example, where he said, right, okay, I've got Parkinson's. We're going to do a marathon to raise money for people with Parkinson's. And we set about doing this marathon. The thing is, he had experience in ultra marathons and marathons previously. And this was my first ever marathon. And, it was a series of 4 laps instead of a start to, end run. And the inexperience in me and the voice in me got the better of myself. And I talked myself, convinced myself into finishing early. So I had 1 lap left to go. I got to about 33 kilometers and, I walked through the finish line early and had to say no thanks to the finisher's medal. And they sent me to the timing tent, at which point the chap there said to me, what was the issue? And I told him the whole story that was so convincing to myself. And, he said, so basically you had enough. And the sort of lights came on. It was like someone threw a bucket of ice water on me. And I had to say, yeah. That is actually it. And so my whole thing here is, let's not believe the stories that we tell ourselves. Let's get people around us who have experienced it and leverage their experience and their journey to help us move forward. And that's what those 2 numbers behind me are to remind me of. Those are 2 races that I finished subsequently to that failure, if you like, or that lesson that I'd had there. So I don't know if that kind of gives you some insight to start with.
Yeah, it's so that's a big lesson. It's and when you speak to stories, we do tell ourselves a lot of stories. We talk ourselves out of things. We talk ourselves into quitting in this case, because we're just done. But we could have finished. Yeah, there's no reason we couldn't have finished, right? Is that kind of the core of the story? Like, 100%. Like I just made a decision I was going to quit.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, when you're in that moment and you've got those thoughts that you're listening to in your own head, you believe them to be fact because they're intangible, right? They only exist in your mind. And so you're not testing them anywhere. When you hear them out loud and when you sound them off of somebody else who's with you or got experience, generally they'll give you some perspective on it. And it's very difficult to do that when we're in our own heads. And the worst part about that whole situation was that my dad with Parkinson's actually finished the marathon. And so you haven't really felt bad until
drive it home.
Until you support your dad who's just been diagnosed with Parkinson's in a marathon and he finishes and you don't. Yeah. So yeah, huge lesson.
Wow. So let's rewind before that. How did you land in that spot? What happened to Brad up to before that time? Like you had built these stories. Where did these stories come from? How did you get a start? Did you start out as a business person from day one, or did you work in corporations or,
Sure.
other companies and whatever? What does that journey look like?
So I think, I can look outwardly and I can see a lot of other people who have a very clear entrepreneurial spirit to them. More so than myself, but I've always believed that I've got an entrepreneurial spirit in me. Maybe not as aggressive as other people, but I've always tried different ways of making money, right? And I've tried loads of different things since I was a kid. Me and my friend who was our neighbor, we would go to a lady who lived in our road, and we would get these little trays of flowers that she would propagate in her garden, right? And we would go around and would sell them to all the other neighbors. Predominantly, again, he features a lot in my stories, to my dad. And he would buy tons of these flowers from us. So I was selling things from a very young age, always trying to make the next buck. And that one thing kind of led to another, but it never got to a point where it was consistent enough for me to be able to live off of it. So I got to the point later on in life where I was married and my wife had gone back to university to study to be a nurse. And I was doing some freelance digital design, marketing work, stuff like that. But it became a real hassle and struggle to chase payments from these people. And so I ended up going into like employed corporate world, if you like, working in different creative agencies in London and stuff like that. So never really letting go of that entrepreneurial dream, always trying stuff on the side, but having a lot of experience with some big design agencies and companies in London, etc.
And I think that's great, actually. I look back at all the businesses. I've been in a good number of businesses over the decades, and And there was a few times where it's like, I really wish I would have worked for a company first, or an agency first, and got that experience. Because in the cases where I did, it was always a huge benefit. Even today, as I look at, running my agency, I went off and worked for a company for 3-4 years as a web developer, building teams and all that stuff. And I take so many of those lessons, like in that time frame, those 3-4 years, I honed my craft. I got better at what I did. I was able to focus on myself instead of worrying about running a business for a while. It had a lot of benefits. And I assume that's the same for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the thing. I think, coming back to this idea of leveraging other people's experience and knowledge to further yourself and your own understanding is true there as well for me. So I got to work with a lot of very talented people that at that stage were a lot smarter than I am. A lot more experienced and were able to show me that there were questions that I should be asking in certain scenarios, marketing, user experience design, that I wasn't asking. And so it's really eye opening. And so I think it's super valuable to be in those scenarios where you're forced to be with people that are thinking bigger than you are, just to push your own boundaries.
Yeah. And I think too, like, even now, because I partner with other agencies, which also helps me because I can see how they run things. Yeah. It creates a framework in your head. Like, you can just start a business. You can, do something, whatever it is you do, and you want to start a business, but if you've never worked for anybody else or never seen how other people would do this thing and pull it off, you don't have a framework to go by. Yeah. So you got to kind of hope that, kind of stumble your way through it, which is okay. It's okay. I've done it. I've done it. And I've stumbled, I've never, had a web design agency, and here I am. But yeah, so that's really great. And then, so you worked for other agency, you got this, and then what was the catalyst to now kind of go out on your own again?
Yeah. So it was around 2020. So the dream had always been to get to the London agencies, because that's what a designer does, right? You want to get into the London agencies. And so I'd got there, and I realized that whilst it was great and I loved it, it wasn't where I was supposed to be. I didn't feel like I was making any real impact. And an opportunity came up for me with an industrial cleaning company who needed help making sense of their website. And I ended up working there for 5 years, growing a fantastic marketing team there. And 2020 came along, and the opportunity presented itself for me to join Sensemaker, which was founded by my dad. So we're business partners now. We're both directors in the business, and we work together. So it was really the catalyst, I think, if you like, wasn't this big romantic scenario. It was the fact that the world was in chaos, and it was the perfect excuse to try something a bit risky and to leave employment and join the business. So that was it.
Wow. And again, you were working for somebody else and probably learning a lot, and then all of a sudden, boom, you were ready when that opportunity came along.
Absolutely.
So your dad, so you're partnered with your dad in Sensemaker. How did he, is Sensemaker a thing that's been around for a long time and you just joined in 2020, or was that something relatively new? How did that come about for your father? Well,
so about 20 odd years ago, he founded Sensemaker, and on and off, I've always worked with him in the background, but in an unofficial capacity. And he helps business owners to maximize cash output in their business. And so it works from a systems processes point of view, busy showing people how the different levers within the business can affect the cash that comes out the other end, and then how to optimize those levers. And in 2020, he said to me, well, why don't you come and work with me? And I said, well, my skills is nothing like what you're doing over there. And he said, no, from a marketing perspective. And I was like, all right, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so the rest is history, really. I was working with existing clients of his, and realized that they were all asking very similar questions. And that's how can we find what it is that makes us unique? How can we be different? And what is it that makes us different? And so I set about answering that question for them. And It's one of those weird situations. I don't know if you've ever had it, Matt, where you're going through life and everything seems to happen one after the other, maybe not so intentionally, but when you turn around and you look behind you, it all kind of lines up and it all makes sense, right? And it all makes sense. So that was my experience in this case, which was really good for me. I've spent a lot of my life trying to figure out what my purpose is. Like I could see a lot of people were very good at one particular thing, and I felt very average at a number of different things. And that always really bugged me. I wanted to be good at something. And it's turned out that the thing that I'm supposed to be doing and making an impact with is connecting people with their purpose and seeing them make an impact in other people's lives.
Okay. Yeah. So this is like one of my favorite story arcs of every person's life. I think it should give a lot of people hope that are still in the mud or still along the messy journey that we've all come from, probably many of us, that you're exactly right, that someday something's going to happen, an opportunity presents itself where you're going to land somewhere, you're going to be at this juncture in your life where you all of a sudden you go take this new path, and maybe even while you're in the path, you look back and you're like, oh, this is where it was all leading. This is perfect. All those things, all those failures and successes or whatever I had in the past, all the different businesses and things that happened along the way prepared me for this moment right here.
Exactly.
And now I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful story arc. Love it.
Thank you.
So your dad is he more like an operations guy? Like he's helping people with the money side of things and you said different levers, and then you're coming in and kind of filling a gap there that he had, where maybe the marketing side of things, which he wasn't touching on?
Yeah, exactly. So I imagine, we call it the Sensemaker method, and I imagine it as a circle. And we split that circle into two halves. So the first half is what I now bring to the table, and that is helping people to understand their unique purpose personally, aside from the business, and helping them infuse that into their business to make their business unique, one of a kind, not just better than everybody else, but one of a kind, and then leveraging that one of a kind uniqueness to make the competition disappear. And then once that's in place and you've got all those ingredients there, you've really got the foundations to be able to springboard into growth. You're in a position where you can generate more demand for what you're doing because you're the only one that does it. Like you said earlier, right? This cool part around creating your name that you can play with. It goes a little bit deeper for us. And what we love to do is create a new space. So we created Sensemaker and the idea of sense making, or at least we're leveraging that. And so we have moved away from this idea of coaches and consultants. We've defined our own area. And the only place that you can leverage sense making effectively is with us. And so if you want the things that we talk about, you can leverage them by using us. And so that's what we help people to do. And so you can create your own space, move away from the competition, and then use that to propel yourself forwards. And at that point, I guess a lot of people say to me, if you're infusing the founder into the business, how does that scale? Right? Because then they're the face of the business. But that's where systems, procedures, operations comes into it, because I see it as, if you imagine the profile of your face, I see systems, operations, procedures as the scaffold that gets built around that profile of your face almost. And it takes the shape of your face. So if you step away, that shape is still there, and people are able to then run those systems going forward, right? And then optimize the business for cash at the other end. So that's how those two halves kind of come together.
I love how you describe that. That's awesome. You have scaffolding around you, and then you step away and it's still there.
Exactly. This is it. This is it. And then you've got the scalable business. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. But what I'd like to dig into a little bit here is building a unique business and what that means. Is I think, especially many of us, we find ourselves in very crowded markets,
yes,
very crowded spaces where there's a lot of competition.
Yes,
and it's like So how, like you're not going to just show up one day, compete and get some sales.
Yes.
You have to somehow stand apart from the crowd or work towards that. So describe that kind of, what your thoughts are around that, and
Sure.
how somebody, what does that path look like to become unique? How do you figure that out?
Sure. So the idea came again from one of these random places that didn't seem to fit until it did. And the scenario was this. I was driving my car with my daughter, who at the time was probably about 5, and my son, who was about 4. And my daughter said to me, completely out of the blue, caught me off guard. She said to me, how are we alive in heaven when our body dies? Right. And so I was like, wow. That's a big question for a 5-year-old. And so
yeah, big question.
I said to her, okay, let's try something here. And she said, okay. So I said, say something out loud. And she did. I said, who heard that? She said, you, Raphael, and me. I said, exactly. I said, say something now inside your head only. And she did. I said, who heard that? She said, only she did. And I said, that's your inside self and your outside self. Without your inside self, your outside self, your body can't live, but it's your inside self that will live in heaven, right? And that analogy works for our businesses.
Oh.
So our business is a container. It's a vehicle that is efficient for lots of different reasons, legal reasons, general other reasons. It's efficient for helping us enable a transformation for people. Whatever that looks like, we're helping people achieve something. Without us in that business, it's just a box. It's just a container, and it's not interesting. And so what occurred to me was the thing that makes our business unique is the founder, because no one thinks like you. No one has dealt with problems exactly the same as yours. No one solves problems exactly the same way as you do. And so it made good sense to me to say, right, well, if we want the best chance at making our business uncopyable, let's infuse ourselves as the founder into that business, make it unique, and then broadcast that unique message to the world. At which point people are going to be saying, I get it. I resonate with what Matt is saying because we're on the same wavelength and I want him to solve my problem. Now, at that point, the competition disappears because the only option that these people have is to come to you because it's the one that they feel is going to solve their problem the best. And you're the only logical choice. And the cool thing about that is that even if you have got competitors directly next to you, because they're potentially broadcasting their own unique message, if they get this process right, you could even be speaking with somebody and you could say, actually, you should work with this person over here who could be a direct competitor, because you can see how that message resonates. And so there's more than enough for everybody to go around, but it just cuts through the noise and you talk directly to the people who matter. And so I always say to people, don't find a market, don't find a niche, get clear on your purpose, broadcast that message, and your niche will find you.
Oh, I love that. So how does somebody now go through the process of, finding, their uniqueness?
Yeah.
Like, how do you develop that? Like, how do you define it? And let's start there. Like, how do you
Sure.
create that picture?
Sure. So I break it down into six steps. The first one is I talk to people and I look at their past. I talk to them about their past, where they've come from, the market that they're leaving behind, their own personal history, things that they've tried that didn't work to solve this problem, things that they tried that did work to solve this particular problem, and why that worked, why that was the best. Then I look at who they're serving. So sort of beyond this generic marketing persona, who are you serving on an emotional level? What is the thing that they want? And this is always easier to do. You can do it even if it's not, but it's easier to do if you're helping other people solve a problem that you once had yourself, because you can put yourself into their shoes. So what is it that they ultimately want? Where are they trying to get to? Then I go through an exercise where I look at the future. What is the new space that you're creating, and what do you call that? So, for example, sense making, not coaching, not consulting, sense making. Define that new space. What is it? What isn't it? How does it compare to what people previously understand in the industry? And then perhaps the most important step is how, right? So this is the starting point over here. That our audience is starting with. This is where they want to get to on the other side of the spectrum, and there's a gap in the middle. how do you bridge that gap? What are your stepping stones that you've discovered with your product or service that helps people bridge that gap from where they are to where they want to be? That is the most important thing, because if you are telling people, if you're showing people how you enable the transformation, a sale then becomes a no-brainer, because you're not having to force feed all of this logic about why they need your product. It's a natural conversation, and it generates a desire in people so that they actually want what you're selling. And then following that, we look at how you share that message. So there's this idea that not all of our audience is starting from the same place. Coming back to that idea that everybody's unique, we're all going to be at a slightly different point in our journey, but we know that the solution we're offering can solve problems for people. So to give you an example, I do a lot of networking meetings. And so I'll be in a networking meeting and somebody might say to me, I struggle to know what to say in my website content, or I don't know what makes my business unique. Now, that's the language that they're using, but I know based on the problem I solve that what they're actually saying is, I don't know what my message is, right? I don't know what the one point is that I want to make to the world. And so I call those audience starting points, and I listen out for the most common audience starting points. And then I rank them from like 1 to 6 or whatever in priority. And I say, okay, this is my primary one. This is my primary audience. It's the one I hear most often. Let me speak to that problem. But there's also all of these other ones that I can start putting out content to educate people, bring them closer to the point where they're going to understand what it is that I'm presenting to them. And then the sixth and final thing is summarizing all of that stuff down into one point. So it really gives you a focal point when you go to a sales pitch, when you're creating content, when you speak to anybody else. You know, what is the one thing that I need them to believe by the end of this conversation for them to want to do business with me? And everything becomes about driving that point home. And so that's the 6 points of message clarifier.
Oh, I love it. And you kind of touched on the how you, like, that's how you develop it. And then how do you basically tell the world about it is through your content, through the stories you tell. And maybe if you're dealing with clients or however you're doing it, the stories you tell to your clients or your customers. And from that, they're able to figure out your uniqueness. And what you bring to the table is that somebody else won't. And I love the closing that gap thing where it's like showing them, like not just selling them, but showing them how they can arrive at their destination. What that looks like. Yeah.
That's the thing. A lot of people in my journey always told me, when you're in marketing, they always say, don't sell the product, sell the solution to the problem. But no one ever really tells you how to do that, until you realize that the reason we buy something is because we all hold a image in our minds of ourselves, of who we would like to become. And every single purchase, no matter how big or how small, is all with an idea that we're moving ourselves all the way or closer to that ideal destination that we have in our minds for ourselves. And so once we understand that, we can say, okay, well then I solve this problem. How does that help people get to that place that they want to get to? It can either help them get all or part of the way there, but I need to be able to show them how it's going to help them progress towards that ideal that they've got. And at that point, it becomes a no-brainer.
I could think of a lot of examples of that, and use myself as an example. I think about, the services I sell. I could tell people I build websites, whatever. We're a WordPress shop. We do WordPress stuff. But why we have been as successful as we are is because we've identified those pain points, those problems people have. And then we speak to those people and show them the light, like what it's going to look like once you start working with us, what it's going to feel like. Like you're going to have less stress. You're not going to be worried about, we'll take care of that for you. And you can go off and build your products, do your marketing, do all the other stuff you do. Any technical problems, we got that. And it's that feeling that I try to instill on them, like this is where we're going to end up. And we do. And then it's a beautiful thing. But do you have any stories from people you've worked with that kind of illustrates how this is played out
Yes.
and worked for somebody?
Yeah. So a good example, perhaps one of my favorite examples, is a lady who I would now say is a good friend, actually, after we've worked through this process. And we started working together kind of in a roundabout way. So as I said earlier, my background is digital design and user experience, and we were on the same networking call at one time. And we got chatting, and she was having a conversion rate problem on her website. And so I offered to just have a chat with her and help her think through some things, because that was what I did for a long time. And so we were going through it, and she's an artisan jeweler, and she makes all this handmade jewelry. And we were looking at her website, and she was explaining it to me. And I asked her, I said, what's this large section over here? And she said, oh, that's me being creative. I love to be creative. And so I've made all of that jewelry, and everybody has a lot of products on their website. So I said, okay, that's not the best reason to put products on your website. And tell me about this small piece over here. And she said, oh, her face lit up, and she was telling me, this is memorial jewelry. This is how I make this jewelry, with fingerprints when people have lost a loved one, on necklaces or palm pebbles, so that you can keep it in your pocket and you can hold your loved one's hand when they're not with you. And she went into so much detail. And so long story short, we started working together through Message Clarifier, and I do an hour's interview at the start of it, just to unpack the person's journey and to understand them in a bit more detail, so that we're working off the same page. And it came about that she had experienced a lot of sad times in her own journey, where she had lost people she cared about, and ended up in a uncomfortable place herself for a long time. And what kind of got her through, we unpacked, was these 5 steps. And so it's really interesting, because it was a real shift in perspective for her, but it's so exciting for me to see, because, some people throw their arms back in their chair when they have this light bulb moment. Some people cry because it's like such a connection with who they're supposed to be and how they're going to make an impact. And so now we no longer talk about her as an artisan jeweler. So all of her competition with high street, or I don't know how you would say it in the US, but mainstream jewelers or other artisan jewelers has gone, and she's what we call a memory catcher. And so she works with people who are wanting to capture memories with loved ones, or have lost loved ones and want to remember them. So she takes people who are stuck in a space of grief, and she takes them through what we call the memory catcher's journey, these 5 steps through the memory catcher's journey, to a place where they can move forward with their life without feeling guilty about letting go or leaving behind the person that they've lost. And so it's super powerful. And the jewelry elements that she creates are now a tool that help people to get through the memory catcher's journey, to experience the transformation that she had herself. And so that's like a little example of how this works.
That's a beautiful story, and it's a great business. So she's basically doing this for others. She's been through this herself.
Yes.
Think you said, right?
Yes.
That's and that makes it even. Yeah, I mean, you're not even selling at that point. Well, I mean, just naturally sells, because you're just telling your story and you're just sharing, and
exactly.
And you've created this. Yeah,
exactly. And so many of those.
I was thinking.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so many of those challenging moments, to go back to the analogy of the marathon, so many of those challenging moments to keep myself going through that. For instance, if our businesses are a marathon, all those times where we want to quit, operating from a place of our own purpose, where we're enabling transformation for people, is the fuel that we need to keep ourselves going through those difficult times. And it really just adds some rocket fuel to whatever it is that we're trying to do as people, to help other people. Yeah,
so I imagine that's got to be encouraging words for somebody that feels stuck. I can't sell. I love what I do, but my messaging's off. Maybe I don't even have any messaging. I just, like I said, I just build WordPress sites.
Yeah.
But if you could do so much more than that, I was gonna say before, I completely kind of a little side journey here, but like my wife has, we had a dog a few years ago, and I don't know if she does this for dogs or not, but we had a dog a few years ago, and my wife we used to call her Bean because she was like a Saint Bernard Labrador Retriever mix, which was interesting. Lovely. But she had kind of looked at the colors of Saint Bernard. She had those beans and, kind of the patterns. And one of them looked like a bean. So one of her nicknames was Bean. And when she passed, my wife wanted to remember her, and she got a necklace made with a little bean on the side, like a gold bean.
Yep.
And that was something that she could carry with her. It helped her kind of deal with, working through the emotions of that situation.
Exactly.
So it sounds the same thing she's doing. Yeah.
Very, very similar. And I'm sure she'd love to tell you some of the stories herself. She does like your dog's nose or something, even just as something nice to keep with you. But yeah, very similar. Yeah. Similar to that. Yeah.
I love that. So you talk a lot about purpose. So at the heart of this too is purpose, is defining that as well, and knowing, is it why you're doing something, besides making yourself unique, but having a really strong purpose for what you're doing.
I think we've reached a point in time here as people on this planet where, for whatever reasons anybody wants to put around it, we're struggling to find self-worth and value. And I think that has implications that we don't necessarily associate with that statement, right? In the sense that, I was talking to somebody the other day who was super down and depressed because they just felt stuck where they were in an employed job. Didn't feel like, after conversation, realized that he didn't feel like he was making an impact in people's lives, and it was just kind of on a conveyor belt, part of a machine. And so I think for me, having purpose and knowing what our purpose is and how we can improve the lives of other people is where things are really at. It's people helping people that is actually the most important thing here. And once we understand our purpose, whether we're a founder of a business or we're an employee in a business, we can live out that purpose and have a sense of fulfillment because we're having impact in other people's lives. And so whilst I work with founders predominantly, it's not limited to that. The idea of purpose obviously goes far beyond that. And I think it's something that we need a lot more consideration of in this current day and age.
Yeah, it's something that gets you out of bed.
Exactly.
You can't wait to sit down and get to work in the morning.
Exactly.
But if somebody, I'm sure there's probably a lot of people out there that's like, I don't even know where to start with my purpose. Where does that come from? Like, there's, what are some examples of purpose? How does that show up? Like,
yeah. So it's a good question, one that I get often. And so what I like to do is I like to say to people, there's always going to be a golden thread that runs through everything that you've done in your life and everything that you do, the way that you think, the way you are, the way you want to help people, and look for that thread, right? Take a notepad, go sit somewhere quiet, and just write down the things that you've done for people that you've enjoyed doing because of the transformation it's helped them achieve, not because of how it made you feel, and start looking for patterns. And so to go back to the memory catching story, it turns out, creating this jewelry and these pieces for people is one way of her living out that purpose that she's got. But another way of her doing that now is with workshops where people can do jewelry making workshops with their loved ones live with her, hands-on. And so what it means is that we can, once we find that golden thread, we can start to live it out and act on it in lots of different ways. And each of those ways become tools for us to help people. And so it's less about the thing that we do and more about the way that we enjoy helping others because of how it moves them forward.
I feel like you got a theme here. Everything kind of leads to helping others.
Always
leads to helping others. Yeah.
Always.
It's like your purpose, the best purpose out there is to think outside yourself.
Always.
You're either helping specific people, specific groups, people, the whole world, something like that. You're trying to make an impact on the world. And that's a huge motivator, to get up in the morning and sit down and get to work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we have uniqueness, purpose. Is there anything else we can throw? Anything else in the sense framework that is critical to scaling a business and growing and doing better? Anything else we want to throw in here in the soup?
Yeah. So I think from my perspective, it might be worth actually getting Dario, who's my business partner, my dad. It might be useful getting his perspective as well here. But I think from my perspective, the last thing I would add to that kind of picture is this idea of what I refer to as movers and takers. So a play on the phrase of movers and shakers, right? And it's this idea that just keeps our mind in the right place with where we're heading with everything that we do in our business. And the whole purpose of this is to say, okay, so we've got two groups of people: takers, people who are out for themselves and generally just want to make a quick buck. Sometimes they're unaware of this idea. Sometimes it's intentional. I've been there. I used to think that you start a business to make money. That making money is a side effect of helping people. And so that's not a great place to be as a taker. It's not going to last forever. And if it does last for a long time, you're not going to be super popular because you generally are going to be a bit ruthless. If you're a mover, you are helping people move from where they're stuck to a better way of doing something. You're saying to people, look, I've found a better way of doing this. Come over here. Let me show you how to do it. And getting clear on your message and communicating back is the art of articulating that idea to people who are stuck in that old place.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's such a good way to put things.
Thank you. I spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah, I know you do. We're talking to the right person today. But yeah, that's incredible. And then the messaging, that's the other thing here that's been a theme is developing your messaging around your uniqueness, your purpose, and all that.
Yes.
And that translates to what your website and just talking to people, how you talk to people and tell your stories, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that what messaging is?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people think that messaging is something that you have in a specific marketing campaign or something like that, which obviously it can be. But in my context, what I mean when I say your message is that one point that you want to make. So you got to get clear on the one thing that you need people to believe for them to come around to your way of thinking, so that you can enable that transformation for them. And then, if you can, once you're clear on that one point, come up with a short story or a narrative that acts as the vehicle to transport that point to people. And so whenever you're creating content, whenever you're speaking to people, you can say, okay, it's for my website. This is the point that I want to make. What is the best way for me to make that point? And so the coolest thing about it is that whilst you're making one point, you can come at it from a million different angles. And so I've done podcasts where it's like deeply philosophical, but I've made the same point. And so it's so versatile because it is authentic, and authenticity is appealing to people.
That's wonderful. So I'm going to completely pivot hard here.
Sure.
You mentioned a few times networking.
Right.
Like, I'm just curious about yourself. It sounds like you do a lot of networking. Is that kind of like how you built your business, or how are things built for you, and how critical a role does that play?
Yeah, I love networking. And if you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have given a very different answer to that. But I love networking, and the idea of anything like that used to terrify me, but getting clear on what you want to say makes it so much easier to talk to people. I use it a lot. I try and go 2 to 4 times a week. I use online networking because I can network anywhere in the world, as well as fitting it in around my day. But I love using it to meet people, and I love using it to test ideas. And so I think that's if there's a super tip that people can walk away from this episode with, whilst they're trying to uncover that golden thread, their own purpose, is to use these networking groups for your business and test out the delivery of this point that you want to make, the delivery of the message that you kind of clarified for yourself. Test it out. See how people respond. Listen to how they talk about the problems that you know that you can solve for them. once you start getting an idea of people's language, and those environments are great for it because it's relaxed and you can ask people questions there and then. Once you get a flavor for that language that they're using, you can use that as a bridge to take them from the old place, the old language that they know, over to the new way that you do things, right? And so you can kind of translate it so that you're not using old market language, which will cause you to blend back in. You're using old market language to bridge the gap between where they are and where you are, and bring them to your way of thinking. So yeah, I love networking groups, free, paid, whatever it is. I love them.
And practice. That's how you get good at honing your message and talking to people and learning, like you said, kind of learning their language and being able to then speak to them and then help them across the bridge. Yeah.
Finding out what's important to them and feeding that back. Yeah.
Yeah. I asked because I'm kind of big into networking, but I've been a little slacking lately. I need to do more networking again. You know, you get to, do you have any, you said you do online networking. I'm just curious now for myself. I'm being selfish now. What networking groups is this stuff on LinkedIn, or is there websites that you go to for networking?
So there's an organization in the UK. They're a lobbying organization that work on behalf of small businesses with the government, and they run a load of free networking groups, which during COVID went online and were super popular and are still online. And so I use a lot of those, had some great results from those. For people that want to take a look, it's called Federation of Small Businesses, fsb.org.uk or something like that. And then there's one that I'm a member of called Only Network, ONLE, and they operate in the States and in the UK. And they're very, very vibrant, very fun bunch of people. So yeah.
I like vibrant and fun.
Yeah, me too.
That's long. Those are my people. I'm gonna have to check them out.
Yeah, go for it. I'll send you a link.
Awesome. Yes, please do. So let's talk about you for a second. So, first of all, what I like to ask is, like, who's your ideal customer or client that you want to work with? You know, what do you have a specific audience you're speaking to and helping?
Yeah. So
an avatar.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of different types of people, huge organizations, one-man bands. The ones that I get the most enjoyment from helping are the founder-led businesses, right? Where they've experienced the transformation themselves and they want others that are stuck where they once were to get to this better place of doing. So there's a lady that I worked with who invented a breastfeeding top, and it turns out that the breastfeeding top was a way that she could get some control and normality back in her life that impacted a whole bunch of other things, like going out with her friends, feeling more confident, feeding in public, all of these things. And so she went from selling a breastfeeding top to selling the idea of finding your me with a milky tea, right? So that's the name of her brand. And it totally shifts this perspective, because she's not selling the top. She's reconnecting people with themselves and giving them the confidence to go back out. So yeah, I love helping people tell that story.
Yeah, that's great. Finding my me with the milky. How does it go?
Find your me with a milky tea. Yeah.
You know how I like words.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fun.
It's a great product as well. I mean, not that I'd ever use it, but it's a great product.
Yeah. Right. Well, you could. I mean, you could play that role. So very cool. So, and if somebody wants to learn more about you, what you do, find you on the World Wide Web, you got a website. Where do you hang out? Do you hang out on LinkedIn?
Yeah, the best place to get me at the moment is LinkedIn. As we said off air in our chat, we're busy overhauling our website, so it's not a great representation of what we do. The business has grown dramatically. Best places to find me is on LinkedIn. Just type my name in there, Brad Bucceri, and you'll find me with my smiley face in a nicely polished photo.
Very good. Very good. Awesome. Well, it's great having you, Brad. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. Great to be here.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already, and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.